Hello and welcome to the second season of Storied Arcs. I am your co-host Mike.
And I'm your co-host Alex.
And today we are starting Grass Kings Volume 1. Well, we've already done the 0 episode and you've already listened to it, but we're digging into the text of it. And it's really hard to say where to begin. I think I have to say my entry point into our discussion is going to be what drew me to this, which is the artwork. As you just open the first page and you're just hit with the colors, the watercoloring, great sketching. The watercoloring can sometimes just cover sloppiness, but in the case of Tyler Jenkins, it's a beautiful looking sketch, and then the watercolor adds this texture to it. And when you get to this Welcome to the Grass Kings panel, I was showing that to my wife when I was rereading this, and I said, I was looking at this art auction site, and that original print is still for sale. I'm really tempted to get it. And she was like, that you could hang somewhere in the house. That's just beautiful enough that we could just have it. It wouldn't have to be up in your man cave. And I was like, I'm glad to hear you say that. However, it is $1,200.
I was gonna guess at least 10. So
yeah. But you can still get a lot of pages from this for $200. Which I think is a very good price for a book that I enjoy deeply.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. And as we mentioned in the 0 episode, my entry also to this book was the art, and one thing I really love that you get, you may not get it in the trades, but you definitely get it in the single issue, which is how I initially read it. It's this nice hard cardstock cover, and when you open it, the opening art spills onto the inside cover. And so you get this opening splash page as opposed to kind of your normal, the inside cover is usually like an ad or something. And then there's a page somewhere of credits. Here, the inside cover, you get your credits, obviously, but it's integrated into this beautiful double splash as the artwork spills out from the first page. And,
I think
the quote-unquote first page is the inside cover.
This is standard for Boom, right? Like, they shove all the ads in the back. They're not interspersed in the text.
That's a very Boom thing. You get to the end of a Boom book, and you have your ads for what's coming next at Boom and things like that.
By the way, can we just say, pour one out for Powerless, which is in the back of the first issue.
Oh, yeah.
The NBC show that I enjoyed and was canceled too soon. Just for Danny Pudi and Alan Tudyk, I would have kept watching. But I think this book outlasted that show.
Probably did, even though the book ran 15 consecutive months. But no, the artwork is truly something beautiful. The colors are incredible, and there are very few things on the comic shop rack that look like this. Very, very, very few things, and it's something that stands out right away.
Well, and to me, there's this Steve Jobs term that he always used, which was product imputation, which is that when someone looks at your product or picks it up and handles it, the value of it should be communicated right there. Like, they shouldn't have to look at the price tag. They should know I'm holding something really nice. To me, picking this up for $4 in single issue compared to the floppies that you get from the big two for $4 that are like half ads, a cheaper paper, and this interior paper is a non-gloss. I mean, just like every detail was thought through with this.
And I have to assume because it was non-gloss, it's because of the watercolor choice.
Yes.
You want to keep.
You don't want the watercolor to look shiny.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And it's and I imagine it's as with Boom, as with other independent publishers, the creative team gets to make the choices on the kind of paper stock they use for both the interior pages and the cover. And it's a beautiful, nice, heavy cardstock.
I mean, whenever Batman has a cardstock cover, it's $1 extra, right?
Well, and that's what DC does right now. They print all the variants on cardstock, and you don't have the option.
I know, and it's like, why are you guys printing your cardstock variants at Kinko's?
Yeah.
There's no way cardstock costs that much more if you buy your own printer and your own paper.
And it probably doesn't, but that's how business works there. And I would imagine, I don't know the contract situation at Boom, but I'd imagine it's very similar to Image, where whatever deal you make, you get to make the choices in terms of probably how it's printed, where it's printed, and things like that. You get to choose all those factors and decide how much work and effort you want to put into or goes into the actual printing of the physical material. And this book, it screams high quality, just absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, you open it, and this is one of the things that I've mentioned in Paper Girls. I love a consistent reading clip. You open this, and there are the little narration bubbles that are just, between 2 and 10 words per bubble, and you just keep moving through at a good clip. We are recording together in person for the first time, and my cat is yelling. So that's
probably my fault.
We may have a guest star on this episode, which would be Fitz the cat. But anyway, we start to get this until we get into the present, and we'll see a lot of this.
Yeah,
a lot of this 1450, 1580, 1650, 1750, springtime, 1920, 1950, now, which is 2018.
It's something they do. It's something they do in the all through the first arc where every issue opens with some scene of the past for the area that is now known as the Grass Kingdom. Whether it's I think one opens with we're in the Prohibition period. One's that during World War One. We see some like pre-colonial times. The native tribes that start the first issue. So yeah, it's meant to all tie into the history of the area, and I think it's meant to bring the reader in because all the narrative captions are all present day. So someone's talking about something that's going on or describing the Grass Kingdom, but it's being shown against scenes from the past, which the idea of trying to feels like
and by the way, I was not that this is only him or exclusively him, but that is a signature Matt Kindt storytelling.
Yes,
is to depict one story on the page and another one in the narration.
Yes,
Department H has a lot of that where it's a flashback or it's flashback being shown and present thoughts being narrated, and vice versa. And we're going to get a lot more of that.
A lot of that in Grass Kings. Yeah,
especially in Volume 2, it's almost exclusively that.
Yeah. But we'll get to Volume 2 when we get there.
But it's not the same as I think a lot of comparisons for Matt Kindt and Tyler Jenkins are storytellers like Jeff Lemire. Mm-hmm. Jeff likes to play with time, but he goes you're fully present back in time when he goes back in time.
Yeah, I don't know.
He's very rarely doing a flashback while doing a present narration over it.
Yes.
You're in the flashback.
Yeah, that very much so.
Whereas you have this weird limbo with Matt Kindt where you're in the present, but you're not seeing the present or experiencing it. Yeah. You're experiencing the past, which I think is a great way to depict trauma, right?
Yes. Yeah.
You're in the present, but you're experiencing the past, and you keep replaying this traumatic event.
You're seeing the actions that are being described, but they're coming from a place of experience, not of a place of kind of of perception there as it's happening. So yeah, no, it's definitely the kind of thing that Kindt likes to do, whether he's just writing his own comics or writing and drawing them, something like Department H. It's a conceit that he likes to go with, and I think it's used very effectively throughout Grass Kings.
Yeah, and one quote that I had, now I didn't write down whether it was from, I think this was Matt Kindt, but he said one idea that was occurring to him while he was writing this is just the endlessness of war and human conflict. And I think that's what we get. First of all, we're seeing this unending fight between the Grass Kingdom and Cargill. Mm-hmm. But on every page, or at the beginning of each issue, we're also seeing this land was never peaceful.
Yes.
You cannot go 100 years without a conflict in the history of humanity over any piece of land. Mm-hmm. It seems. Yeah. And the fatigue of that.
And yet, all they want, all the people of the Grass Kingdom want, is just to be left alone.
And for the most part, I think that's what the people of Cargill want.
I think so.
Most people would say that's what they want,
yeah,
but their actions are far from that. And then eventually, you even get into infighting within both communities.
Yeah, well,
so it's like if they can't fight each other, they fight themselves.
Yeah,
and it's a bold statement about human nature that's just under the surface of this book. It doesn't draw it out, but I think it does enough to. I would kind of depict this story as an anti-hero story. I don't think there's Humbert is the only pure evil character in my recounting.
Yeah.
Everyone else has got like something dirty, some demons in them trying to do good as they see it.
And that's kind of the whole conceit of the Grass Kingdom. The idea that these are kind of the lost, maybe broken souls looking for a place to just
which is actually really similar to M. Night Shyamalan's The Village.
Yeah, but The Village was kind of dumb. Sorry.
Yes.
No. Just
and it ripped off a Twilight Zone episode.
Yeah.
So,
well, but at this point, you can pretty much, Rod Sterling was like genuinely a prophet. So I think everything has ripped off Twilight Zone at some point. But yeah, no, this is, and so what you talked about, the idea of this kind of idea simmering beneath the surface, I think it's true because, this first arc really kind of nails home the idea that this Grass Kingdom wants to be this free and independent state. And when we think about that idea, specifically in this country, it usually never works out well because that idea is always typically associated with kind of far-right extreme white supremacists who are not simply anti-government. They actually they actively want to destroy the government.
Right.
They want to take up arms and actually dissolve the government. While I think what's being presented here are just people who just want to be left alone. Like they don't care about they don't care about, they're not like taxes are evil. They just don't care. They want to be left alone. You don't bother us, we don't bother you. And I think that offends the people of Cargill. And it's specifically, Sheriff Humbert. And we see there are some other, simmering tensions there. But the idea that it's almost like, hey, we have to do this.
Right.
You have to as well. You don't get to do your own thing.
Well, and the great irony of all of these like extreme libertarian stances is we have is it Bruce? No, Robert, the officer. Bruce.
The officer's Bruce, yeah.
Yeah.
The former sheriff.
Driving down the road, returning the kid from cargo who got in there, and he says he's never sucked on the government's teat while driving on a paved road.
Yes.
Presumably paved by a government using tax dollars.
Paved at some point.
And he's driving a car which was made it's yes, a private company made the car, but not without public research and funding, and he's got a seatbelt on.
Yeah.
Which is only in the car because the government made them do that. It's like, you may not think you depend on it, but you just don't see the ways you depend on it. But I think the more generous interpretation of that is he never wants more from it than he needs.
Yeah.
And he sees, inherently, that means he sees the rest of the world as people trying to take more than what they need from the government. And they talk about this.
I was going to say, I think
the quote is, their goal is to think for themselves, live and work for each other. And they have high walls, strong backs, and there's something about greed.
I'm thinking that's when Robert's talking to Maria, right?
Yeah, no, I wrote it down. I just can't read my handwriting.
After I'm trying to find where it is. After Maria has emerged from the lake,
it's somewhere in volume 1.
Yeah, he talks about how kind of what their big ethos is, and I am trying to find it as well. And he talks about the idea of like it's just no one being greedy.
Right. Everyone take what you need. The trick, don't be greedy, be satisfied with having enough. Yeah. Yes, that's an issue 4.
Yeah, and so it's the idea of that if we all understand we're all in this together and we all live within the means that we've set for each other, that we're all just going to be good,
Which the funny thing about that is like in American language, liberals and conservatives would agree to that.
Yeah. Well,
we all actually agree on that principle. We just disagree where the line is
on how to do it. Yeah,
and how to implement it. But I think everyone's like, it'd be great if we all live within our means and we all had enough.
Yeah, and everyone was content with having enough.
Right. It's like
But then what's enough? What's enough?
Well, that's the thing.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
100% of people I know, and I would say I have a diverse, eclectic range of political views in my friendships. All of them would agree with that statement. Yeah. Like, don't be greedy, be satisfied with having enough. The problem is, I think the stat was, the last one I read was that someone interviewed Wall Street bankers with values over $10 million, and only 13% of them consider themselves wealthy.
Yeah.
And it's like, boy.
Capitalism, it works, right?
Right. and then if you go to, I think the website's still up, globalrichlist.com, and you enter your salary, it will tell you what percentage of the world's wealth you are. And if you make minimum wage in America,
that seems depressing.
Now, and it's unweighted.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. So it's unweighted, but if you make minimum wage in America, you're in like the top 5 to 6% of wage earners in the world. Presumably the history of the world. Now, again, without cost of living, it doesn't mean much.
But there's some perspective there.
It is some perspective.
Yeah. If you know how kind of how data is being presented and why it's being presented that way, there is some perspective there.
Right.
But
to be clear, lest there be angry comments, I am for a higher minimum wage, and I do not think the minimum wage currently is like a livable wage. No. And certainly not a good life. So I think, I think you have to factor in the weight. But it was just one of those things that was like think about this, because someone like me, middle class for sure, but I'm doing a comic podcast. Like comics are very expensive.
Yes, and they're only getting more expensive.
They are only getting more expensive, and like, and I consider myself moderate in this consumption because I'm friends with you. And I remember standing next to you for like your weekly pool, and I'm coming in like every other week getting like 3 to 4 books, and you've got a stack like the size of an omnibus each week.
Yeah. I've cut down a little bit, but I mean, still, I probably read 10 to 12 comics a week. I mean,
well, then that's new. That's not like for this podcast where we're going back and reading things.
That's new issues.
That's taking in new stories.
Yeah. It's
is like crazy that you still have time to like watch TV and stuff.
I watch a lot. I watch a lot less TV than I used to. A lot less. But it is just kind of one of those. It is kind of one of those things with kind of the way the industry is. But it's just I think about the way that's presented. That kind of mission statement that Robert says to Maria, which is obviously saying that to a new character that shows up in the Grass Kingdom, and he's also saying it to the audience. And I kind of think about what Kindt and Jenkins are trying to do right there, and present with this kind of community, what they're trying to say, if anything. And I get the sense that they're not trying to make them as the villain. They're not trying to make them like, No,
we're not supposed to look down on these people.
Yeah, they're not like an armed militia like, Ruby Ridge or Waco or something like that. They're not that armed militant. I think that they're really trying to impress upon the audience that these are folks who just want to be left alone. They actually
they're live and let live.
They probably don't even have specific beefs against the government. No.
Aside from, I mean, they do have quite an arsenal, which we only even scratched the surface of.
Yes, yeah. Which kind of seems like the thing maybe that you feel like you might have. But yeah, I think if you were to ask them specifically, like, why are you doing this? What's the reason? Their reasons would all be because we want to. We feel we live this way, as opposed to maybe some other characters we meet who might have very specific anti-government concerns. I think they're trying to position this group in a different light, maybe. Again, not so much putting a value judgment on them, but trying to put them in a different light when we think about this kind of, sovereign citizen movement. When we think about people who want to live off the grid, who seemingly are anti-government. And because these people are anti-government, not because they hate government, just because they simply want to do their own thing. And I think they're trying to make a distinction there.
By the way, do we know where this is?
We don't. I actually had a note about that. So,
I in my mind, I knew with some degree of certainty that it was South Carolina, North Carolina, or Virginia.
Yeah.
And I'm realizing there's no evidence for that at all.
No.
And I know someone who has a brother who lives off the grid, much like this, in Montana, which seems like a great place to go do that.
Yes, probably so.
Like, he doesn't even have a social security number.
That's right off the grid. So no spoiler there, but later, I think in volume 3, one character talks about coming up from Florida. So a character starts in Florida and comes up, but they never say where he goes. I mean, this could be somewhere in the Mid-Atlantic.
Well, that and I have to say,
At the same time, though,
so Mid-Atlantic makes sense, and they have 4 seasons.
Well, yeah, they have 4 seasons, but they don't have mountains, so it's not like in the Appalachians or something like that. It also, like, if you told me this was somewhere in Kansas, Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, like,
it works.
It's it's somewhere in Middle America, and
Right.
I think it's intentional that they don't say where it is.
Because it could be anywhere, and so anyway, but there's also this psychology of, as we learn throughout the trade here, every one of these characters has demons, and all of them have chosen this life of simplicity as a retreat from the weight of the world, so to speak. And the book does not say they're right or they're wrong.
No.
For dealing with their trauma in that way. It's not a judgment call. It's just what it is. It's just, this is what some people do to deal with their pain from the past, is they're like, I'm going to strip myself of the distractions of the world. It's like almost being like Amish without the religion. Right?
Yeah, kind of. Or
like there's a purity to
going away to a
simplicity.
temple or something like that. Yeah. No, there is judgment passed on some characters for some choices they make, but none of them are for why they show up in the Grass Kingdom or why they're there.
Right.
So there are other things that happen in the story where you can say that was objectively good or bad, right choice, wrong choice, in so much as you can pass that kind of judgment.
100%.
But yeah,
I judge every single one of these characters, and I actually typically don't like stories where I'm not rooting for a particular character.
Yeah.
Like, I want some vested interest in them. And in this one, my vested interest is in the plot, the mystery of it, not a particular character. I don't know if there's someone here that I'm like, I really need to see them come out on top. Well, the only one I know can't finish on top is Humbert.
Yes, yeah.
And I think I even have like a little bit of a beef with that he's like so unsympathetic. He's so evil.
Yeah.
That it's almost caricature.
Yeah. And this first arc, he's definitely presented as he is the mustache twirling, like, this guy is definitively a
He's
bad
horrible
guy.
to women. He's horrible to the Grass Kingdom.
Yeah.
He's bad at his job.
Yeah.
And by the way, since we're not going in any particular order, I've just got a lot of random thoughts written down here.
Yeah, so do I.
First of all, Asher, especially in Volume 1, when he's talking to Pinball there, looks exactly like Tyler Jenkins. Like, if you go on Tyler Jenkins' Instagram page, there's him wearing overalls and a white T-shirt like that. His hair looks just like that. And he's playing guitar.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's so interesting to me when people do self-portraits. That being said, every Jeff Lemire character looks like a Jeff Lemire character, and they all
look the same.
Vaguely like him.
Yeah, they all do. They all kind of do. They're all kind of tall, skinny, and gaunt. That's
right.
Jeff Lemire looks.
I'm like, I would love to have him draw my portrait because I'm not quite that skinny, but I think he would flatter me in some ways.
I having seen this art, I have an idea of how he would draw you or me because his style is his style.
Right.
But yeah, it is.
And I would definitely be wearing more flannel than I own.
Yeah, definitely.
So.
Definitely. Well, Canadian's going to Canadian. So, but no, there is something interesting about that the artist likes to do that. I think about how Christopher Nolan cast someone to play him in every movie or look like him in every single movie.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, in Inception, it's DiCaprio.
Right.
Think with the haircut there, and in Tenet, it's Robert Pattinson.
Right.
So yeah, someone who looks like Christopher Nolan, is going to be in all of his movies. He's going to maybe not look like him, talk like him. It's going to look like him, have the kind of haircut.
Right.
It's all the same way.
It's a way of him inserting himself in a Hitchcock style way.
Yes.
Without actually having to appear.
There's something about that too. And Asher too, also is a musician. We find out a little more him and Pinball a little later, but you see that they're kind of on the younger side.
Yes, in fact, on the Boom synopsis, which I think we read in the Zero issue, it describes Asher as being more like a son to Bruce and Robert than a brother.
Yeah, we don't get the exact ages, but we know that Bruce is the oldest brother. We know that Robert, who is the ostensible king of the Grass Kingdom, he is younger than Bruce, and both of them are drawn, I would say, significantly older than Asher is. It looks like Asher and Pinball.
Robert has a lot of miles on him.
Yes, yeah. He's also lived a pretty hard life. There, we find out more of his story a little later. But the idea, and also, Robert has a lot of miles on him too. A lot of those self-inflicted. But it appears that Robert and Bruce are you would maybe assume relatively close in age.
Yeah, but when you see the Robert flashback panel
Yes,
at the bottom of one page, you can see like, oh, he was probably 30 in the earlier one.
Yeah, and then but then how long has it been? I think we get an idea.
Well,
how
yeah,
long...
it could be like the two portraits of Abe Lincoln that were 2 years apart.
Yeah,
and he looks like he died.
Well, and in between those two headshots there, his daughter Rose disappears and his marriage crumbles and Robert's life kind of falls apart. So that could have been, I think they talk about how many years. It's not really important there, but I think in terms of the relationship of the brothers, that even though Robert is the ostensible king and Bruce is the chief lawman, they're on a mostly equal footing.
It's like the mayor and the sheriff.
Yeah. And the fact that they're brothers, and again, they feel relatively close in age, and then there's got to be some large gap to where Asher,
huge gap. Yeah.
Where Asher can't be more than like 20. Him and
Pinball looks younger. Pinball looks 16.
Yeah, it's possible both those are in their teens. We don't really know, but I think it's just meant to show the gap there because the scenes we see with Asher and Pinball in this volume. What are they talking about? They're talking about music. They're talking about movies. Pinball's talking about.
By the way, I'm curious when we get there if you know what movie he was talking about. If that's a real movie.
Oh yeah, you know what? I thought about that. I think I may have made some notes. I don't think I did.
I meant to Google it, but no one talks about this book.
Yeah.
But there's nothing for us to poach or steal from.
But there's an idea that in that scene, Pinball talks about, hey, he snuck over to Cargill to see a movie on a screen. So there's the idea that that's clearly. Someone who, you see both of them, they clearly love their families. They love this world they live in. But also, kid wants to see a movie on a big screen. So he's going to go to Cargill and see a movie on a big screen.
Pinball seems to be pushing against the bounds of it, whereas Asher's very happy in the kingdom.
Yeah.
Pinball kind of wants a little bit more. He wants a little more art and culture and just a bit more than what the kingdom has to offer him. We see the limits of the kingdom very early on.
He doesn't seem to want to leave, but he just wants. It's like he wants more of the outside world to come in.
Either that or like just a dual citizenship passport
like
type
that.
thing.
Yeah.
By the way,
those are conversations that Asher and Pinball have that you don't see the older characters have. When
no, because all the older ones chose to be there.
Yeah.
They all came later in life and landed there on their own. Presumably, these two were born in the kingdom. And they have a very different take on the kingdom.
Well, and I think too. I think I can't remember the exact history, or if we even get it in arcs 2 and 3. But I believe, and maybe we'll correct this when we get to it later in the volumes. I believe Robert, Bruce, and Asher's parents are among the group that started the Grass Kingdom. So I think all three of them may have been born there. I don't know if that's confirmed or not, but I'm pretty certain. I'm pretty certain.
They say it's been near 100 years.
Well, the area.
It's been 98.
The idea has been around 90. The idea that this land has been, but I think the specific Grass Kingdom, in terms of the version of it that we're seeing now, I think they say that was started by. I think it was started by their parents. And
okay, I was going to say it could be their grandparents.
I'm pretty sure it was their parents. Okay. So in terms of this version of it, then they talk about the land being, kind of disputed. We talked about that. You see some of the history as it goes through all the different variations of what's happened in and around this area. But I think this version of what the Grass Kingdom is was started by their parents and thus passed down to them, which is why Robert is in charge and Bruce is in charge. But yeah, those conversations,
they're almost a monarchy.
Yeah. But the conversations that Asher and Pinball are having are only kids are having those. When Bruce talks with Shelley, the woman who runs the junkyard there, they're not talking about, what's in the outside world. They're concerned about what's happening in the Grass Kingdom. How are you holding up? Everyone's worried about Robert because Robert is clearly, I'd say fallen off the wagon there, but I don't know if he was ever on. But after his family trauma, after his family trauma,
the fact that everyone in Cargill knows he's a drunk.
Yeah, he's supposed to be leading this group of people, and has clearly decided just to be drunk on his porch, staring out at the lake where he thinks his daughter may have gone into. So there is you get a sense of some of the kind of the younger generation of how they see and how they view themselves, both in the Grass Kingdom and in relation to the outside world, and the older generation who, is clearly much indoctrinated into, we don't have anything to do with them. We don't have to worry about them. What's going on out there? It's not important. We just want to be here with our own problems, deal with them our own way.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll say on texture before we're not going to recap the plot per se, but we will discuss the significant events, is that the art here, when it's a flashback, it's a very subtle switch that you notice subconsciously, but the background switches to white. It's like he inverts the colors.
Yes.
And there's no question that you're in a flashback, and it doesn't have to say it's a flashback. And to me, that's like the greatest gift an artist can give a writer is to say, I'm going to depict this. You don't have to waste words or captions or bubbles. Probably the letterer enjoys it too. Because it's like, if I was the letterer, I would want to take up as little space on these beautiful watercolors as possible.
Yeah.
Which I think, by the way, the letterer does a fantastic job. Which is, his name's not on the front cover, but it's Jim Campbell.
Jim Campbell, yes, yeah. We talked about in the Zero issue, he does a lot of Boom work, and he's done work with Matt Kindt before. I don't know if Boom has like an in-house a letterer, but he does a lot of the work there, and so I think he's familiar with. I
think
Kindt's
Boom
style.
takes care of people. I think that's the big thing.
Yeah. And I think also with these flashbacks too, the background is white. A lot of times there is no paneling, no exact paneling.
Right.
It's more open, and the line work is a little less finished. And I guess one could argue with Tyler Jenkins' natural style that the line work's a little unfinished. I would disagree with that. But if you look at the flashbacks, it's almost like you're looking into a memory. It's looking like the faces aren't quite as sharp. The lines and definitions aren't quite there with what you see in the present day timeline when we cut back to the current day. And it's so blatantly clear that this is a different time. This is we're remembering this, and it's different than the openings to the issues, which aren't flashbacks. We're just seeing a different time. Especially in this first arc when we're going back into Robert's memory, whether it's the time when the day his daughter Rose goes missing, or the aftermath when he's arguing with his wife Amber, his ex-wife now. We know we're in Robert's mind, and so it's almost like the haziness there. The shift is what he sees in his mind, and it's a very simple. It's not simple. It comes across as
it's
a very
simplistic,
simple,
but it's not.
It comes across
it's
as
simple, but not simplistic.
Yes, yeah. It's an automatic visual signifier to the reader that we've changed times, we've changed perspective, and now we're inside Robert's head, and we're seeing the things that he remembers and the way he remembers it. Before we cut back to present time.
Well, and it reminded me of this song lyric from it's a Death Cab for Cutie song called "What Sarah Said." And the line is, "It stung like a violent wind that our memories depend on a faulty camera in our minds."
Yeah.
And that's the thing is it's like you have all these memories, but memories aren't super linear. They're kind of all kind of float around like this. It's like I can replay significant moments in my life, but moments that are years apart, days apart, can replay within a second of each other. That's just the way memory works, and he's depicted that.
Yeah, and I think that's why when you see these flashback scenes, there are no panel borders. Even though when you see some of those some of those pages there, it's very clear there are 3 or 4 or 5 images there. But the specific lack of actual panel borders, where everything blends together, the ground on one shot blends into the sky, the other, or into the lake, or into someone's hair, or the background. It's all meant to feel like it's very fluid, which is, again, like you say, that's just how memory works. And it puts you in that place, and it puts you in the right sense that there's something surreal about this, because it's not actually real. It's memory. We're talking about
and the settings are less distinct than the characters.
Yes.
The people are what stand out in his memory.
Yeah.
Not the specific tree or the lake.
I think at one point you see maybe he's in his kitchen, but you kind of see a table, you kind of see a counter, but there's no detail, versus when he's actually in his kitchen in his house for Robert. So it's all meant to be that kind of just the the way we think memory might actually work. If we were able to put down the thoughts in your head, it wouldn't be linear. It wouldn't be straightforward. It would
not be the replay cartridges in Minority Report.
Yeah.
By the way, same concept. Guy loses his daughter in a body of water.
Yes.
And replays the memory and haunts himself.
Unless you have an eidetic memory or something like that, you're not going to replay things like you recorded them. They're going to be kind of murky and I think,
subjective.
Yes. Yeah. And Tyler Jenkins, his natural art, it works for that watercolor style can take you from a very detailed, very colorful, beautiful setting into this more open, loose interpretation of thought and mind. And it's something he can work back and forth very, very quickly and very easily through his natural work.
That and the characters just living in his mind's eye in those scenes.
Yeah.
And my favorite shot it's like this kind of beautiful, painful reminiscence. It's the issue 2, and he's narrating all this out loud, you realize, and then he says, you sleep? That's okay. You can go to sleep. Glad you can sleep. And then he says, Rose, is that you? Yeah. And Maria just is wide-eyed, like deadpan, like, where am I? What have I done?
Yeah, like this guy just unloaded his entire life on me.
And he's clearly a tad unhinged.
Yeah. But so just kind of one last thing in the art there. Again, I love how it's depicted in the flashbacks. I think that works so well. But I think the idea of this free-flowing kind of open watercolor style, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I like the idea that this style represents kind of the two sides of the people in the Grass Kingdom and the idea of the Grass Kingdom. The idea that it is open and flowing and it's free and it's unbound by in this case physical lines and where the pencils are. It's open and it's allowed to go where it can and wherever it kind of wants and where it feels. But at the same time, by allowing that, there's an inherent messiness to it. It's not clean.
Right.
So
two sides of the same coin. There's always a trade-off.
Yeah. So these people want to live off the grid. They want to be free, quote unquote, as they see it. Okay, you can do that, but the trade-off is it's not going to be easy. There are always going to be issues. There are always going to be problems. There is an inherent messiness to trying to achieve that freedom. And I like the symmetry of seeing that art style and whether it's conscious or not on their part, you get the sense as you read it of this, like they're trying to contain the openness and the freedom,
I mean, I think it
but
is
they're failing at it at times.
I think it's intentional, and I don't think in this case it's possible to read too much into Tyler Jenkins, since as we talked about in the Zero issue, this was his idea.
Yeah.
He came to Matt Kindt and said, "This is what I have. Write it." Mm-hmm. I think this one was the art leading the storyteller rather than responding to the script, which is a very unusual way to write comics.
Yeah, it's in a lot of ways it's closer to the old school Marvel method, where where the writer would write an outline and then the artist would come back and do all the art. And then the specific dialogue and stuff would be written.
Fill in later,
fill in later,
and that happened with Kirby a lot, right?
Oh, yeah.
Kirby, that was like preferred.
Well, I mean, most of the comics that Stan Lee wrote back in the day with either Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, whoever it was, it's the reason why it's called the Marvel method. But yeah, I think you can really see that in the art here that Jenkins just has a very specific idea of what he wants to depict and how he wants to depict it. Who these characters are, what the setting is, and then a lot of it's then you kind of write the story around the visuals you're being shown, and I think it makes for a different kind of story than a lot of times we're used to seeing in comics.
Yeah, and the initial idea for it was him imagining what it would be like to lose a child. That's it.
Yeah.
Out of this, we get this whole like little mini dystopian society of like, rebellious libertarian rednecks and all this other stuff. But the whole premise was, oh my gosh, how horrible would it be to lose a child? Yeah. And so when I think you're seeing, I'm laughing at him. It's like the saddest thing in the book is when he's having his memories and confusing Maria for Rose. That's Jenkins projecting himself there.
Yeah.
He's like, if I had lost a child, I would never be able to get past it. I would never not replay those memories. I would never stop looking for that person.
To the detriment of everything else around you.
Everything.
Because as we see for Robert here, as we learn, I think we get more specific details in volumes 2 and 3, but we know his marriage fell apart, and we know it fell apart because of Robert's
and he knows
obsession.
That.
Yeah. This obsession of I gotta get an answer. I gotta find the truth. Was she kidnapped? Did she drown? Was it this serial killer that everyone thinks he's making up? I think we get the name, the Thin Air Killer, at some point. Is it tied to some bigger mystery? Was it just a mistake? Was it just an accident?
Right.
He has no answers, and he's determined to find something. And said, if he looks behind him, the wake of wreckage is literally his entire life, not just the loss of his daughter Rose. It's everything that came after it. And it's heartbreaking to see, which is why when we first meet him, he's just sitting on his porch getting drunk.
Yeah,
that's all he's doing, staring out, and he's staring out at the lake too. The last place he saw his daughter. Just
he's traumatized people are stuck in that moment.
So when Maria pops out the lake, his thoughts are just all about Rose.
He's shocked. Yet is ready for it. And is anticipating it.
Because he jumps into action. He jumps into action to save her, not because he's thinking. I mean, the end
not
result.
Not because he's like, she needs help. It's Rose needs help.
Exactly. Right, it's not fully altruistic. It's not like I got to save this woman who's possibly drowning or could have drowned. It's I got to save Rose.
Right. Well, and I think there's also, even in a more vague sense, I guess you could make the argument that he has two great needs in his life. One is Rose back, and the other is redemption.
Yes.
So, I mean, I think he would be willing to do a kind act, but I think he springs forward because his instinct is.
I agree. He is looking for redemption because clearly he blames himself because he was supposed to be watching her and he fell asleep.
He confesses to his wife.
Yeah.
In this arc.
I believe it's is it the end of this arc? I think it's the very end of this arc.
The end of this arc. We don't do spoilers here, so I'm not trying to do one on purpose.
But we see the flashback of him. I closed my eyes just a second. She couldn't have gone far. What happened?
Right.
So he clearly blames himself. So he is looking for some redemption there. But this specific act of when Maria comes out of the water, he's motivated totally by that's Rose. I got to save her because I didn't do it before.
Right.
And so the end result
is my chance.
Yeah. The end result is he's helping this woman who we'll get into Maria's story now and some of the actual plot. The idea that she swam 40 miles from Cargill across the lake.
So I was wondering if it's 40 miles across the lake or if it's like a 40-mile drive and the lake is slightly more direct. But either way,
I don't know.
It's a harrowing journey.
Yeah,
we know that.
Yeah.
And she made a pit stop along the way.
Yeah, she
the
stops.
island.
There's an island in the middle that isn't technically part of the Grass Kingdom. There's an ex-military guy, an ex-Navy SEAL who lives there, but that's not technically part of Grass Kingdom. But yeah, so whatever the distance was, I think the implication is that maybe an average person probably couldn't swim at all at once. So having to stop in the middle at least gave her a chance. And she even says, why would you do that? When she's asked, why did you swim? The idea was she was trying to get out of town kind of incognito and maybe even hopefully throw someone off their scent that she went for a swim and didn't come back and she drowned. So no one's looking for her. So it's kind of twofold as to why she would have swum. But yeah, the idea that when she pops out of the lake, she's clearly exhausted, completely spent, can barely even stand before Robert can help her and bring her into the house. But yeah, that kicks off the actual plot.
That's the actual plot. And let's talk about the irony of this first move here. We have this autonomous isolationist want to be left alone. And the first thing we see is opening arms to Maria and then going as far as to defend her and protect her from the Americans.
Yes.
So
the outside world.
The Grass Kingdom is living out the words of the Statue of Liberty. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled message, yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, the tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. To hear that applied to someone fleeing America is just a great ironic twist.
Yeah. Well, and there's also, I think we get a little more history. I don't know if we get it specifically here. Again, sorry for the spoilers there, but we do find out. I think Maria talks about, we find out that she is Sheriff Humbert's wife.
That's definitely in volume 1.
Well, that's volume 1, but also we know that she's in the country illegally. That was part of the thing.
She got married,
but that was part of the things that Humbert held over her. Was that her immigration status? So again, we talk about where is
it's
this?
A gross inversion of what the country should be. Yeah,
that she fled somewhere else to come to America, and now that she's here, her life is so bad she wants to flee to a subset of America that is quote unquote defected. So yeah, the idea that she is defecting from Cargill to the Grass Kingdom is very much like she's defecting out of America, out of what the idea of America is, because that's what Cargill stands for.
Ostensibly.
It stands in for the audience. That is the outside world, and that is their closest neighbor. There's also the town of Raven, which we learn a little more about. It's like the next closest, I guess, but Cargill is the immediate antagonist, I guess, because the town isn't the antagonist. The sheriff's the antagonist.
Yeah, well, an antagonist doesn't mean evil.
It doesn't, yeah.
So they are pitted against each other in that sense.
Yeah. But they're pitted against each other because of what Humbert does. Like he sends, we found out.
Yeah, but like in the very first panel is picking up a kid. Who just like explored his way over.
But we find out that he was actually working for Humbert.
That's true.
Once he's trying to deny. He's like, I got lost. Blah blah blah. And Bruce knows right away. Like you're a spy. Whatever. Blah blah blah. So we'll give you the dime tour of what's here, and then he says like, you see this road right here. Once you cross this, you're one side's Cargill. One side is the Grass Kingdom. You stay on that side. And then that issue ends, or close to the end there, he goes back to Sheriff Humbert and says, and he's like, hey, what'd you find
issue
out?
2.
I think, issue 1 or issue 2, where he's basically, what'd you find out about them? And then later on.
Oh, no, it's,
And then later on, once he knows that Maria is over there, that she is effectively defected to the Grass Kingdom, he sends, he sends his heavy out there, Big Dan, to specifically go cause some trouble, to effectively start a war, because he wants his wife back, and also he has an inherent hatred of the Grass Kingdom and the people over there. So yeah, that pushes the plot, and it very much becomes this us versus them in terms of the us being the Grass Kingdom, like
this idea of otherizing.
Yeah.
Which, anytime you refer to someone as the other, you have inherently created an antagonistic relationship. And even though I think the problem is the Grass Kingdom has no intention of having an antagonistic relationship. No, but their very act and existence is seen as antagonistic to Cargill.
Yes, yeah. And again,
and the mayor,
as we mentioned, their whole ethos is just leave us alone.
Right? They're like, if you didn't know we existed, that'd be great.
Yeah, we're not going to bother you, so stop bothering us. But yeah, their mere existence is what bothers. And I said it probably doesn't bother most of the people of Cargill. And, we get a couple scenes there, here and there, and even later in the series, we get some scenes here and there. You get the sense that the average person in Cargill doesn't care at all about the Grass Kingdom. Like that, whatever you want to do, whatever. They're not bothering anybody. But yeah, they are a personal affront to Sheriff Humbert there. So yeah, the Maria going over there and deciding to leave and leave him specifically and go to what you would presume is his most hated place in the world, which is just across the lake or around the lake, I guess.
Right.
Hits him the wrong way.
And this is another great. Something that's diametrically imposed, obviously intentionally so, is that when Humbert shows up in this volume, he antagonizes Bruce repeatedly for wearing the police uniform. Mm-hmm. And it's like, now one of these people is standing up to protect a defenseless woman. Mm-hmm. The other one is looking to start trouble and misuse his power and be domineering and abusive to this woman. Mm-hmm. And he's saying, I'm the real cop here. And it's like, well, no, to everyone reading this, Bruce is the real the real one that should have the badge, the one that has actual authority instead of institutional power.
Yeah, and even in that scene there, Humbert alludes to some incident in Raven, about Bruce's past as to why he has the uniform, why he has the car, and all of that. But yeah, you're seeing someone who is posing as police versus someone who is acting like police.
Right.
But
and Humbert has it backwards, which is which.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which
but it seems
love.
It seems fairly obvious to the reader, which is which. Who is doing the job, and who is
and who's playing
at the
cops
job.
and robbers.
Yeah.
No, I love that.
Yeah.
And I love, like, this is one of my personal things is that, I've read that whether it's my Myers-Briggs, which is an INTP, or my Enneagram, which is a type 5, one character trait that has always been true of me is that I have no respect for positional authority. To me, all authority must be earned by, your charisma or your character or your actions, or your inherent goodness to other people. Like, someone pointing to a badge or a certificate on a wall means absolutely nothing to me. So I have never respected someone because of, something shiny on their chest. It's all about what's underneath. And I think that is probably what I have most in common with the Grass Kingdom.
Yeah.
Like, we don't need official titles and systems and structures and, now I'm not naive enough to believe the world would work that way.
Yeah.
I think we do need, by the way, who would have been a great, guest writer on this would be Alan Moore.
Yeah.
Except he would have made the Grass Kingdom all out heroes.
Yeah. It'd be a different spin.
It wouldn't be anti-hero. It would be they would pure hero.
Yes. They would be
anarchists against the world.
Yeah. They would be a little more active in the sense of not just being ignored by the government, of actually trying to take down the government. That would be
they'd be planting bombs in the Cargill police department.
Exactly. That'd be the more militant side of kind of what we see when we think about these type of communities. The ones that make headlines here in the States. Again, the armed militias, the ones that are actively trying to destroy the government. That'd be Alan Moore's take, versus the people here who are just like, it's too much effort. They just
right.
Stay
and
away
I think
from
that
us,
Alan Moore one is sexier. This one is much more subtle.
Yeah.
And I think it's harder to build an audience this way.
Yeah. Well, and it also, it makes me wonder, like, do more places like this exist in the country? Because the ones we hear about are the ones that are the armed militias, the ones that are trying to take on the government, the ones that are
violent,
the ones that are in standoffs, and because they're trying to make a point, they have actual goals to achieve, versus the goal here, which is just forget about us.
Right.
We don't exist. And you mentioned you knew someone who lives off the grid with no social security number. Like, I wonder if I know
someone who knows someone.
Yeah, knows someone. Yeah. If a community like this would exist, would we even know about it? Because the whole point is to not know about them, right?
So, well, and I think that's another one where it's like the location is not given.
Yeah, which I think feels intentional.
Could be like, I just drove from Cincinnati to Columbus, Ohio this past weekend. This could be somewhere in between there.
Oh yeah,
it's like these are two real cities, but man, in between them is 90 miles of like cornfield and farmed and flat land.
No, I mean,
which by the way, we don't have any flat land at all in Cincinnati.
Yeah, but
we walked like 3 blocks in Columbus. I was like, I can't even fathom seeing 10 streets ahead of me because it's all flat here.
Well, if
in
you
Cincinnati,
if at some point we want to have turn the podcast into the discussion of the geological history of the state of Ohio, I can do some of that given my daytime profession. But
that's true.
But I mean, I mentioned before with the kind of states we thought this could be in. Like, Ohio is on that list. There are parts
I would peg it as
there are parts in Southwest Ohio,
Mid-Atlantic, to Midwest.
Yeah, all the way in. I mean, now we don't really see mountains here.
We don't see mountains. We don't see beaches.
So
there's fresh water.
Yeah, so we're not going as far as Colorado, maybe, but there are parts of Colorado that aren't in the Rockies. maybe the eastern part,
There's very flat Colorado.
Yeah, this could be any number of like 15, 16 states. And so I wouldn't be surprised if communities like this exist. People that just want to be left alone. Just don't bother us, because they're the ones we don't hear about, because they're not the ones that are, taking control of government buildings and sending bombs in places and things like that. They'll defend themselves if antagonized, if approached, as we see the Grass Kingdom here. When Humbert kind of, he straps up and goes after the kingdom because he wants to get Maria back. They'll defend themselves, but they're not looking to actively do any harm to anybody. It's just more of a precaution, and that's maybe a fine line. That's maybe a little bit dotted and vague, but I think it's a distinction that Kindt and Jenkins are trying to make.
I just figured something out in real time here, and I think this is a breakthrough for me. I think I've narrowed it down geographically.
Okay.
In the very first issue, we have a panel at the top that says 1750 AD springtime. There are buildings there in a covered wagon. I used to live as far west as St. Louis, Missouri, which is just barely in Missouri, right across the Illinois line. St. Louis, Missouri, founded 1764.
Oh.
So that has me closer to the East Coast again, in terms of it has, white European settlers.
Closer to the East Coast. I'm sorry. Okay, first off, let's get St. Louis is like,
maybe
40% across the country,
Oh, yeah.
So like
close. Well, I'm just saying, yeah.
It's not exactly halfway, but it's pretty damn close,
Oh, yeah. Right. No, I'm saying I'm ruling out, but that rules out Missouri, Kansas, Dakotas, Minnesota.
Maybe rules out the northern states, and maybe rules out some of the mid-Atlantic states.
Which I have friends in California, and everything we just mentioned is just one blob to them.
Well, yeah, no, my
like
my folks live in California now, so yeah, they anything.
Surely they didn't forget what other states are like.
If we talk to them now, they've been in California for about almost 20 years now, and it took them about 30 seconds to be like, you know what? Never going back to anywhere else. So
yeah, well, my sister's out there, and every time she tells people that she's from Ohio, they're like, yeah, you're from Idaho. And she's like, no, I'm from Ohio. Yeah. And they're like, is that different?
I don't know where that is. Like, I don't know where that is.
It's like, it's super different.
Yeah. Well, so it could be. Now, isn't Matt Kindt from the...
Matt Kindt lives in St.
Louis, right? Yeah. So
specifically, not to call him out by neighborhood, but it is publicly available information that he's in Webster Groves.
Okay.
And he used to go to occasional signings and events at my comic shop, which is now called Apotheosis in Tower Grove South. Just a little shout out in case there's a St. Louis listener.
There we go.
There are many great shops in St. Louis, but that one was walkable from my house.
So it could be conceivable that we are somewhere in the Missouri-ish area.
Yeah, well, and just because St. Louis was founded in 1764 doesn't mean that's when the first person showed up.
This is true. Yeah. So again, we could be in that part of the country of the Ohio, Mississippi Valley.
I was putting it in
River
Eastern
Valley.
Time is what I was trying to do.
Well, but at that point, we're pretty close to Central Time, right? I mean, this could be like Southern Illinois, right through the bottom, the southern tip of Illinois, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it changes somewhere in Indiana.
And I will say, I do think when I was reading this, when you said Mid-Atlantic earlier, like the Carolinas and Virginias, I didn't feel that. Maybe it's because I lived in Virginia for several years. This felt like Midwest, but not like heartland. Like this didn't feel like Nebraska, Kansas. Like this felt like kind of lower Midwest in the Missouri, Southern Illinois kind of area, Indiana, Southern Indiana. That's what it felt like to me.
So I guess the next clue would be what kind of town is Cargill, but we don't want to get
too
dug in on this.
Yeah, but from, what we see about Cargill, it looks like every other small town, again, in kind of middle America. So
right.
But yeah, so I guess let's see, where did we leave off before you had your mind-blowing revelation? It's really about I guess it was kind of the attack on the Grass Kingdom, right? Again, the idea of
I mean, it's Humbert driving this whole plot.
It is,
right? Because he drives Maria away.
Yeah.
Maria takes refuge.
Yeah.
That could be the end of the story.
Yeah, you
right?
can walk away.
It's like, And by the way, they're much more readily accepting of her than they are of other people.
Yeah.
When they're deporting the kid at the beginning,
yeah,
they're like, I don't believe a word that comes out of this kid's mouth. Get him out of here.
Well,
Maria shows up, and they're like, we will die to protect her freedom.
I think Bruce, I think picked up right away that kid at the beginning, Lowe, that he's this kid's a spy. He didn't wander here by accident. But then I guess the idea of, someone walking into town versus someone swimming across the lake. Now maybe that's a pretty good cover, but that's a long way to swim to try and pull one over on the Grass Kingdom. So
and she may have been crying out for help, which this other kid was caught snooping.
I don't think I think she just emerges and then Robert picks her up.
Water.
Yeah. But also
presumably gasping for breath.
Yeah. And also
coughing.
I think
gasp.
Not that Humbert would be clearly not okay with his wife leaving him. But like if she had gotten into a car and drove to the next town over, Raven, like he's not taking up arms against Raven. But I think specifically because
he probably still would have taken up arms against the Grass Kingdom because he's looking for an excuse. He's fishing.
Yeah. So it's the combination of like, it's almost like in his mind, like she's going to leave me. She can go anywhere in the world, and she goes to the one place that I hate the most. It's almost like he feels like it's like an extra twist of the knife. Because again, if she had left him and gone to the next town, Raven, and be like, we're done, we're out of here, he probably is not going to be accepting it because we clearly see he's an abusive husband and not giving her kind of any sort of freedom or leeway. But if she had gone there and say, we're done, we're over, I'm moving out, he might have been more willing to eventually accept it. But the fact that she went to the Grass Kingdom,
right,
is what he immediately that switch flips on him. Is like, no, we're getting her back, and I don't care who gets in the way because these are people he hates anyway. People that he needs just the smallest excuse to go after, because in his mind he doesn't recognize their fiefdom, their independence.
Right.
He just thinks they're squatters.
The end of issue 1, he does say, "Well, did you find her?"
Yeah.
Which means
he knows
kid wasn't wandering in.
Yeah.
For no reason or general snooping or even necessarily in this instance to be antagonistic. Yeah. However, the next person he sends is Big Dan.
Yeah. Well, because at that point he knows.
Which, by the way, is a name that is reserved for John Goodman's character in Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?
Absolutely, yeah. I thought the same thing. And but this guy's pretty big. He's clearly drawn as a large dude. But no, yeah. He's his whole. He knows there's something. Humbert knows that's where she went. He's convinced of that. And so he sends a recon in and the kid Lowe, and then when that comes up kind of fruitless because Bruce is all over him, he sends Big Dan in, and Big Dan goes and causes some trouble, which is what he was commanded to do.
I thought at the end of issue 2 that I didn't realize it was a pistol whip. I thought that was a bullet right into Pinball.
Oh yeah,
and the suspense. It turns out it was pretty benign injury for someone that's a real troublemaker like this. Mm-hmm. But I think have reason to believe because later can be threatening.
Yeah, well, yeah, but I think you see that you don't know what happened to Pinball, and then the next time we see Big Dan, he has now made his way to Robert's house. He sees Maria, and he pulls a gun on Robert. Now, maybe the idea is he's only there to take out Robert because that's where Maria is, and he's not looking to cause too much collateral damage.
Right.
But again, we're left with that cliffhanger of, okay, something happened to Pinball, and we see that Big Dan is gunned later on, is armed later on. So
right.
yeah, you can kind of put 2 and 2 together and think, well, this is Humbert's heavy, so he's out here deliberately trying to cause trouble.
Cargill doesn't, or Humphrey does not care what happens to Robert.
Yeah.
Would prefer he's dead.
Yeah.
So it's like, don't cause more trouble than you have to. Yeah. But if you have a reason, go ahead. So, you kind of get the vibe.
As you're reading it, I think you're absolutely right. You think that Pinball's dead. Because we find out he's not. He's just pistol whipped or just knocked in the head or whatever. But yeah,
the art is actually pretty clear in hindsight that he's pistol whipped.
Is it?
Yeah, you can see the gun is not in a firing position.
Yeah.
Which to me is kind of extending the same mercies to a kid that the Grass Kingdom did.
Yeah.
Like there's a defense of the innocence of youth.
It's almost it's almost like Big Dan sees him as a non-combatant.
I mean, yeah, Big Dan's holding it by the barrel.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, you're right. Though. I forgot about that.
And hits him with a handle.
Yeah. You're right. About that. But yeah, so when he rolls up on Robert, and I'm sure if he rolled up on Bruce or Archie is the guy in the Grass Kingdom who's up in the water tower or whatever with the sniper rifle. If he rolled up on one of them, he'd have no problem pulling his gun, which we see him do when he gets to Robert's place. But eventually he unfortunately meets his end via Maria, who steps in and shoots Big Dan in the head.
By the way, can we talk about how idiotic this taunt is? So after that confrontation, he shows up with Robert. He says, "Robert, how about that? I'm surprised you're sober enough to stand. Won't be for long." As he punches him, I'm like, I'm sorry, the punching will not affect his sobriety. Well, it will affect his ability to stand. Yeah. But this poorly conceived insult, perhaps intentional, because these guys are not. Yeah,
not
they're not the most polished like Sorkinian characters.
You think about the Luca Brasi wasn't the most loquacious character in The Godfather.
That's true.
All the guys that Michael sends, not really talking a whole lot. So yeah,
this guy actually reminds me of the hitman villain in The Rocketeer.
Yes.
Really big tall guy with same hat, same vibe.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That guy makes it quite a bit longer into the story than this guy does.
Also, not a lot of words from him.
Not a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe none. Just growls.
Oh, he might just
I haven't seen The Rocketeer in years. But...
It's fantastic. Wildly underrated. So good.
And there's a comic adaptation, or it came from a comic.
And there's also a current new comic that kind of picks up after the events. It's like a whole new story. But I know Rocketeer is great. But you're totally right. The vibe, the look, everything about him, it really does feel like. I think the characters call him Frankenstein in the Rocketeer.
Yes.
I don't think it's his actual name, but maybe what his credit is as. I don't know. But he does look like that.
And that must have been just barely public domain when they started using that in another movie.
Yeah.
But here's the big plot twist to me. Robert is looking for someone to be a Rose replacement. He's looking for someone to protect and nurture. And very quickly we learned that Maria is not a damsel in distress.
No.
She pulled out a gun and blows this guy's brains out.
Yeah, with pretty much no hesitation.
No hesitation, and I'm not unclear what she thinks the consequences might be. It's like, if you step back in Cargill, you're done. Like, you just murdered a guy.
Well, but I think also, she's obviously married to the sheriff, Humbert, so she knows who Big Dan is. I'm sure,
right.
She's aware of who he is, and we'll talk about a little later when we get to the end of the podcast, the end of the episode of kind of my favorite moment from this arc, but.
By the way, 5 bullets. I don't know if you noticed that.
We'll get to that. To that. But I think she's the only person that really knows what the consequences are.
That's true.
Because this is the world she came from, and so when you see her act with no hesitation, because I think maybe she understands that Humbert's not going to stop. That it's all or nothing at this point. So yeah, when Big Dan has Robert at the end of his gun, she walks up on him. I think she says like 2 lines, and then nope, my bad. She says 1 line. She says 1 line. I ain't going back. And Big Dan
calls him Daniel.
Yeah.
It's like, I know you.
Yeah, yeah.
The Big Dan name doesn't scare me. Nothing. She's not intimidated.
No.
And you don't even. She is holding a gun like someone who knows how to hold a gun.
Yeah. It looks
this
like
is not like
her first time
right.
holding and or shooting a gun.
Right. This is not like in a Western where like the damsel in distress tries to pick up the gun and is totally worthless. Or my favorite one of those is the movie Commando with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh God.
Where the woman picks up a missile launcher and fires it backward.
Yes.
And shoots it in front of them while they're driving away instead of behind them. And it was like, just casual sexism baked into this. It's like, granted, a 50-50, I would fire a rocket launcher backwards as well.
Probably, yeah.
But it's nice to seeing a female character stand up for herself, not need anyone's assistance, take full agency here. And it wasn't like, I got caught up in the heat of the moment. There's 4 follow-up shots after he's dead.
It's deliberate. Yeah. Well, and I think, we led into that with the idea that Robert saw her initially as someone for him to take care of, as a replacement for his daughter and maybe his wife, someone that he can be, to use to help him get his life back on track. Realizes right away she doesn't need that. But
and perhaps it's also a signal to him that wherever Rose is, she's fine.
Yeah, well,
because women aren't these delicate flowers.
I think the end result, what we see with Robert at the end of this arc, is that, whatever he was missing, or whatever he was hung up on, he's not over it maybe, but he understands how to deal with it better.
He's moving forward.
He understands how to deal with it and move forward. And part of that is Rose being there. Sorry, not Rose. Maria being there, and I think specifically the kind of the attack by the sheriff. The idea that we have to defend ourselves, and Big Dan showing up was kind of a motivator for him. And then when Humbert shows up later, there is this idea of like, kind of, got to get your butt in gear and understand that the Grass Kingdom's under attack. So no time to be drunk, no time to be hung up on the past, because the future of everything they have is in the balance.
Right.
So her presence there, while maybe not the way he initially thought would affect her, still kind of ends up in the same kind of place for him.
Yes.
It's not great that they have this shootout with with the sheriffs and the deputies from Cargill, but it is the motivating factor for him to get his life back on track and understand that he can't keep wallowing in the past and his own kind of self-pity.
Well, and he takes responsibility for killing Dan.
Yeah, that's right. I had that note
which
too.
is
Protecting
her. So it is. He does get to like have his little redemptive "I'm protecting her" moment, even though you didn't do anything, dude.
Yeah. You took a punch to the gut.
You wish you killed him. And by the way, can I just say that first of all, they intend to hide this body as if anything else would have happened to Big Dan between Cargill and the Grass Kingdom. Yeah. It's like, how dumb do you think Humbert is? Like, Humbert wouldn't even need to believe you killed him genuinely to come start a problem with you.
Yeah.
But you're going to hide the body because, they'll go through the lake. Mm-hmm. So then they go to Archie, right, to deal with this? Because it's not Archie. It's the guy with the red hat.
Yeah, no, it's Johann, the Birdman.
Right.
And they give him what's called an aerial burial,
aerial
funeral.
Right. So at the end of this arc, we have introduced, and Hemingway dropped it in the first issue, I think, that there is a killer among them.
Yeah, there could be a killer. There might be.
There might be a killer among them.
We get some of those.
Would not your list of suspects be the guy you go to when you want to get rid of a body who's incredibly efficient with it?
Yeah, but then there's the idea of like, well, he's the most obvious guy,
or is he the fence for whoever did it?
Yeah.
But either way, my investigation starts with him, which it does not when they get into the investigation.
Yeah.
No spoilers.
Yeah. But so we a good point to mention. We do get some of this history here, and it goes back to why they're not dropping the body in the lake, because when Rose disappeared, when Robert's daughter disappeared, they dredged the lake and they found like hundreds of unidentified bodies, bones, remains. So it's impossible to say. And there is this hint of this serial killer in their midst. Again, I think I name checked him earlier. They end up calling him the thin air killer. This idea that, and Robert became obsessed that this is what happened to Rose. And he got shut down by Humbert, who was actually deputy at the time. His father, Humbert Sr., was the sheriff at the time, and I think what's interesting about that is you see in these flashbacks that are kind of like almost feel like newspaper clippings because the lettering goes to that typewriter text. They talk about how in this case, Sheriff Humbert Sr., says, hey, we can haul this on our own. We don't need government assistance or help. And it's the kind of idea of like, well, that's almost like a Grass Kingdom mindset,
right.
This idea of like, we'll do it on our own. This is our problem. Leave us alone. So, you get the sense that the people of Cargill probably also maybe not the biggest fans of the U.S. government in general and government interference.
And it hurts Humbert's ego.
Yeah.
He likes to threaten calling in the feds, but if he was going to do it,
he would have done it. Yeah,
it'd be done.
Yeah, and so there is this kind of funny juxtaposition that
I think someone like Humbert has the same mentality as the people in the Grass Kingdom without the same level of courage or conviction.
Probably, yeah.
He has the same desire for autonomy and leave me alone.
Yeah. Because
he's too comfortable in the system.
He wields his power as sheriff in Cargill that way. But there should be rules and regulations above that dictate what he does and how he does it. But he wields with, kind of unilateral power. I can do whatever I want. But yeah, the idea that they might have a serial killer in their midst. And what do, at this point, our Humbert is a deputy. He's Humbert Jr. What does he learn from his father is the idea of like, no, we don't need your help. We'll solve this on our own. So they are then now rejecting this potential help because they are rejecting the idea that there's a serial killer here. And again, that's the idea that Robert fixates on, which eventually leads to the dissolution of his marriage because he's so obsessed with the idea that she didn't actually drown. She didn't run away. She was a victim of this, and there's a bigger thing going on here because she's not the first kid that's died, or there have been other, murders or deaths or whatever it is. There's a pattern of this, and there's something else going on, and they're not getting the help from Cargill, which again is kind of the double-edged sword. And I think we get a flashback. Is it later on? I think it's when maybe it's in issue 5 or 6, maybe. The idea of it was the trailer that they had all the blood in. It's before the shootout. It's when Humbert goes to see Robert, and they talk about an earlier death that they experienced in the Grass Kingdom, and the idea of how Robert at the time was like, hey, you guys called to investigate this. We need some help. We think there's a big problem going on. And Humbert's response is like, why should we help you? You don't want to be part of us. You're your own kingdom, do your own investigation. And so this idea of like, well, if they work together in some way, maybe they could solve this case. Maybe they could help each other. But because the Humberts feel so like offended by the idea that this group of people would set up their own land, their own rules or whatnot, and now they're calling them for help because they got a dead body, like the gall of them to all of a sudden need our help. And then so naturally their response is like, no, well, if it suits us, we'll help you. Like, there's something on our end we can help you with. It's going to benefit us. If it works out in our favor in some way, yeah, maybe we'll help you. But otherwise, like, don't come crying to us that you need help with an investigation because you told us you don't want to be part of us. So,
well, then, he's not going to recognize their status as real police or an investigation. I don't share investigations with you guys.
Yeah.
You're a debunked cop.
Yeah.
Living in a non-existent country.
So there's this weird, tenuous relationship of like, there are times that when maybe they need a little extra help and they don't, who do they turn to? They've already angered their closest neighbor. And even when they do come in to help investigate, they're not really helping investigate. They're doing their own investigation. They're not helping the Grass Kingdom find out anything. Whatever they find.
Well, there's no desire to help.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is Grass Kingdom genuinely asking for help for mutual benefit. And like a guy like Humbert, there's no such thing as a win-win.
No.
It's like, I take all, you get nothing. Like, I can't, it's not enough for me to win. I have to also defeat you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, this is maybe my only pushback on this volume of 6 issues is that I find Humbert to be like a bit of an evil reduction. I do think there are people that are that uncomplicated and basically evil in the world. So it's not that he's unrealistic, but he's uninteresting.
But I think in this story, maybe because all the other characters we meet that are important, that are any significance, they're all from the Grass Kingdom. So we all see them have some shade of light and dark in them.
Since it's your only Cargill people are Big Dan,
Low,
and
Humbert.
Yeah. And Low seems more opportunistic than like evil.
Yeah, well,
he's taking a gig.
His role is to just be the spy.
Right.
Big Dan's role is just be the heavy, and his role is to die. And then you have Humbert, who, he's the only really significant character who's one dimensional.
Right.
We only get
but it's
one.
A shame when your arch nemesis
is so obviously your arch nemesis. It's so obviously evil.
Which is what Ray Fiennes said when he was asked to play the role of Voldemort in Harry Potter. He was like, "This is not an interesting character. It's just pure evil." And I think that actually spurred the backstory we get in book 6, because he said that when he was cast for the 4th movie, which would be around the time they were writing the 6th book, and it was like, oh yeah, I should probably add some texture to this villain if it's going to be 7 books.
Yeah, you need something there. But in this first arc, you don't get anything from Humbert. You get a guy who he's full of hate. He clearly hates his wife.
A wounded person.
Yeah,
like the Grass Kingdom.
Yeah.
But they're working on it.
But we don't get anything on that. I mean,
no, but like no one. Well, yeah, no, I'll say that no one comes out like this way as from birth.
Yeah,
like these people are created by circumstances or choices. The Humberts of the world.
They to quote President Bartlett, they weren't born to do this, wanting to do this.
Yes, they weren't born wanting to do this, and we're not spending not nearly enough on education.
But so you obviously get a sense that Humbert has some sort of backstory, but we don't get it here. So he's just presented as this very matter of fact. He's the bad guy. Whenever he shows up, whatever side he's on, we're against it, and that leads to this kind of all-out war, this shootout between.
Again, if this were the end of the series,
it would have worked.
It would have worked. It's fine.
Yeah. And I guess his men are their other sheriffs, the deputies, and it looked like there's some regular citizens of Cargill. It's unclear, but they end up the Grass Kingdom ends up dropping like a giant tear gas bomb, which is, I guess, just something they have around.
I actually thought, but given what we've seen police around the country wield in the last 5-10 years, small tanks and military gear, I thought at first it was some real explosive, not just a gas bomb.
And they talk about that, part of the they have their own airstrip in the Grass Kingdom, which dates back to them building planes for World War I back in the day. So that's why there's an airplane hangar and
you get the 1910 flashback.
Yeah, you have they have an airplane mechanic there who runs their planes, and they had this giant thing of tear gas that they could drop on the Cargill the sheriffs, and eventually it comes down to a showdown between Maria and Humbert, and Humbert takes a shot in the gut, which Robert then. And
by the way, that's
probably saves, I guess.
Yes. Oh yeah.
By taking him on horseback and
taking
him back to his deputies, so he can, get some medical attention back in Cargill. So
you would bleed out there.
Yeah.
Also, worth noting, I think that in 5 we have the storytelling technique of the reading the story to his daughter.
Yes.
That narration is placed over his actions.
Yeah.
That's the Matt Kindt thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Where it's like, on one hand, you're like, dude, I don't want to read too much into it. It's like, no, read into it.
Yeah.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's right there.
It's literally on the page. Yeah.
This story's about the story, and this story, and the other one's they're about each other.
Yeah. He is the knight in shining armor on the valiant steed riding in to save the day.
And by the way, the opening panel of 6, stunningly beautiful.
Oh, the dragon?
It has the dragon.
Yeah.
Let me just say, for a second, I thought it was a pterodactyl, and I was like, this would be the second straight series we've covered on this podcast that has pterodactyls in it.
Yeah. Although, worth noting, though, there is a dragon and some people that maybe look like Vikings, and there's also a date in the corner,
490 AD.
So apparently there were maybe dragons in Middle America in 420
I'm
AD.
going to say it. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore.
Yeah, well,
Sorry, it was right there. I saw it coming and I couldn't stop it.
There's nothing you can do about that. It hits you in the face.
Yeah, you just have to watch it.
But yeah, so there is again in this other moment we talked about Robert trying to find some sort of redemption. Trying to fill that maybe a void in his life, and he sees in this moment as he's trying to ride towards victory, I guess. He is envisioning himself as maybe his daughter would have, as he's telling her a story. You get the knight on the horse charging in, and really, of course, he does kind of end up a little too late because Maria just shoots Humbert. But again, as we mentioned, after that happens, he throws him on his horse and takes him back. So we know that he lives from kind of the end of the, I guess, works as kind of a coda. The last pages of issue 6, the last pages of the arc, we see that Humbert is alive and seemingly doing okay. But yeah, Robert in the end wasn't the hero to come in and end everything, but he was the hero to maybe, save a life of.
No, and the only one to shoot to kill is Maria again.
Yeah.
Big Dan Humbert.
Yeah.
And she's not. She's totally justified in this from what we know, assuming she's a reliable narrator.
Yeah.
But she's not fighting for anything bigger than herself, it seems.
No,
she's fighting for her life.
In this case, she's fighting for her. Everyone else, and we see some flashes.
And I didn't mean that as criticism of her as a character. That's just, it's what it is. We see Robert clearly motivated by a protection of Rose imputed to Maria.
And we see flashes early on. We see Robert go around the town, kind of, rallying the troops, and everyone's saying they're in. And we get a couple panels here and there. We see Pike, who's the shopkeeper. We see Shelley, who's the junkyard. We see a quick little shot of Hemingway as he's hiding on their desk. I guess he's a writer, so doesn't have a gun there. But we see everyone else. We see Archie we see Asher and Pinball as lookouts. We see Archie. So everyone is firing back, but they're all there with the idea of we're protecting the Grass Kingdom. But Maria isn't technically a resident there. She's just.
Well, and that to me that's where I went to the Statue of Liberty quote earlier. It's like they just immediately are like, "Oh, you're in need. Now you're one of us.
Yeah, because
you're running away from something. You're one of us. Yeah. You're haunted by demons, running from your past. You're a Grass Kingdom citizen.
You're here for a reason, but your presence here, it's almost like we don't care why you're here. It's a little added bonus maybe that she's trying to flee Humbert, but they almost don't care.
But they're suspicious of people who don't have a reason to be there.
I think so. Yeah. So
they're not suspicious of people plagued by demons.
Yeah.
That's the signature.
Yeah. So the fact that her presence invites the conflict, her specific presence invites Humbert to mount up and take up against them. Their reaction isn't like, well, then leave, and because if you leave, then we're fine. If we turn you over, then we can go on living doing our thing. But the fact that it is Humbert, I think a little extra motivation there. But I think if it were anybody and someone were to come at them to try to forcibly take them back, I think they would have reacted the same way. And when Robert goes around and as he's rallying the troops, all the responses are like, yeah, we're in. There's no questions asked. No one's like, yeah, maybe we should talk about a truce and give her back. No one's thinking that. Everyone's like, she's here. But it's less about she's here. It's more just that someone's coming with force.
Yeah, no, I mean, to me, the Grass Kingdom, and I just thought of this analogy, the Grass Kingdom here is what Wakanda is in Infinity War.
Yeah.
In Maria's vision. It's like,
a little bit,
we don't really have a relationship with you,
Yeah.
but you're here,
Yeah.
and no one invades our sovereign soil.
Yeah.
They don't take our stuff, even though none of us know you.
Yeah, even though you're not actually our stuff,
right.
You just got here.
You're on our property, and no one violates that.
Yeah. That if you're a problem, we'll deal with you, but no one else gets to come in and tell us what to do with you.
Right.
Yeah, we decide.
Yes, you don't violate our sovereignty, and I find kingdoms like that just immensely respectable and enjoyable from story point of view. But anyway, so that basically wraps our story. And then we get this quote at the end that maybe there is a killer in the Grass Kingdom. You hear the crack of doubt.
Yeah.
And it's like, now we dealt with the enemy from the outside, but now we potentially still have an enemy within.
Yeah.
And that's where it ends.
There's a scene there, we get a little bit, we get more of Robert's story. Again, we see Robert is kind of cleaned up. He goes down to Raven, the next town over. His ex-wife Amber's there, and they have a nice little moment of just like Robert kind of opening up and kind of spilling what he's been dealing with. And then it ends with this, Bruce over in Cargill, which seems like maybe a no-no. What are you doing over in the office of the enemy?
Right.
And Humbert does kind of, so what Bruce accuses Humbert of, him and his dad of, that, hey, there was an investigation into this thin air killer. You guys had evidence. You lost it and you blew it. He's saying that you guys are at fault. And what Humbert says, like, yeah, okay, maybe we did. But I'll tell you what, all the evidence we had said it was someone in the Grass Kingdom. And that's what kind of Bruce takes back. Bruce kind of storms out, and you can imagine him being like, yeah, whatever. And then he leaves the office, and then as he's driving back, he's like, that little seed is in the back of his brain.
It's festering, and I think he knows the difference between a taunt, like a truly fictitious taunt, and someone throwing a fact in your face.
Yeah. And he said you can imagine him playing it off as like whatever, like he plays it off in the moment as a taunt. But we clearly see when he's back, in the Grass Kingdom, he's having a drink with Shelley, and there's a one look on his face. He's kind of laying across the benches there holding a beer, and it's very much like that idea is festering in his mind, that he knows deep down that Humbert didn't lie to him. That wasn't that he's been thinking about what he said, and he knows maybe something that he always knew, but kind of denied.
Right.
During when as all these killings were going on, all these disappearances were going on, all these deaths were going on, that maybe he knew deep down, but never, because despite it all, he is still a former sheriff. He's someone who has done this kind of work, and so said maybe something he just always denied in his subconscious, that Humbert just knew. He knew if he threw that out at him, that maybe he could start something bigger in the Grass Kingdom.
Yeah.
And we see Bruce. He's clearly affected by it. And
again, in the words of President Bartlett, that's a thought that's going to fester.
Yeah.
That's when his physician is giving him a flu shot.
Yeah,
and says
the military coup.
Yeah, the military coup.
Which side are they going to be on? Yeah.
He's like, "What makes you think the Secret Service would be on your side?" And he said, "Well, that's a thought that's going to fester."
But yeah, so you see that so we've as we said that if the comic ended here and was just these 6 issues, I think it'd be a very cool, very interesting story. But they've clearly set up, we got something else going on here. We're going to move into this idea of that there is
end of part 1 to be continued.
Yeah.
They telegraph it there. And by the way, I've been lied to on the last panel of a comic before. I know I vented about Morning Glories before.
Yes, they don't always get the chance to do that.
But I think our Romulus comic suggested that there was more coming.
I think it did too. I think it did after those 4 issues.
Which is just that one we're definitely gonna cover that. That's gonna be a one shot because it's just 4 issues.
Yeah.
But man, it had so much. It was just dripping with potential.
It's entirely possible it's a book that only Mike and I have ever read. It's possible that no one else in history has ever read this book except us.
Look, I know at least 1 or 2 other people bought it because I've seen them used at half price books.
Yeah, but that only means they bought it. Someone purchased it and sold it back. Doesn't mean they read it.
But it was a very disappointing year because I was also getting really into a book called The Skeptics, which I think was another one that went 4 issues
and then stopped.
And I remember writing to both publishers saying, like, I loved this. Where is it? And they're like, we have no plan to continue that.
Yeah.
Like, hey, at least they responded.
They did respond, yeah. But yeah, so,
Kevin Feige never writes me back.
He's a little busier than con publishers. But yeah, so this is, but we do know, that it is going to pick back up. And one thing about the publication is we talked about in the Zero issue, there are no breaks here. It's 15 issues, and it goes 15 straight months, which is little unusual, but again,
it's an impressive feat. But I think
is.
with a smaller team, it's possible, and there's clearly a tight friendship between Matt Kindt and Tyler Jenkins.
Yeah, these guys work well together.
Yeah, and the lettering, you can send it off and get that done very quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I think it comes down to how fast or how quickly Jenkins works. His art style, the watercolor style, not so much the pencil work, but the coloring style is very reminiscent to me of Sean Phillips, who's one of my favorite artists.
Yes.
He works almost exclusively now with Ed Brubaker, and he's colored now by his son, Jacob Phillips. But it is this watercolor look. It is this kind of open, freehand kind of stuff. And the thing about Sean Phillips is that everything I've heard from him and from Ed Brubaker is that dude's a machine. Like, he pumps pages out. And Brubaker talks about,
he would have to, based on how much stuff they've done together.
His motivation to write is less about things need to get published and more about Sean needs work. So
Sean is bored.
Yeah, I got to give him pages. And so maybe it's something about that watercolor style that kind of artwork, that form lends itself to being quick. Because when Lemire does his own stuff, it's a lot of that watercolor work. Again,
when you get the watercolors out, if you want to match the palette exactly from page to page, I think you gotta go before it dries up.
Maybe so. Maybe
you
it's
can sketch it all and you paint it all in one day.
Maybe it's inherent in that specific medium.
Some artists will surely correct me.
Because
I can't even do finger painting.
I'm posing the question, but when I think about 15 issues here, the type of work and how great it looks, that's 15 issues straight, and it's that type of work. When I think about the kind of work that Lemire puts out, Jeff Lemire, when he writes and draws his own work and colors his own work, again, the pencil work is different, but the coloring is that watercolor style. He pumps out an incredible volume of work. Again, Sean Phillips and his son Jacob, when they work together on the Brubaker books, this stuff just comes out quickly. And I wonder if it's something about the art style. And I'm not saying it is. And I hope there's someone out there who is vastly more artistically talented than I am and know how to if they have some comment about that, let us know, because it seems to me that these type of books, there are few and far between. I'm guessing because not a lot of folks work that way, but the ones that do, like, they seem to be able to pump out work. And maybe it's just coincidence that these artists are just, they put stuff out there. But when I think about those three styles and the type of medium they work with, they seem to be guys that can pump out work, and not just hit deadlines, but like they are in it, versus some of the guys who are working traditional or even all digital.
Mitch is all digital, I believe.
Yeah, but even his stuff, it's a little less detailed, it's a little sketchy, a little open, kind of open line work, but still, he needs breaks because his stuff's tough. It's detailed. So I said, I wonder if it's something specific to coloring with water paints, with watercolor, that maybe allows these guys to
well,
really
that, and I
work.
believe like the slowest artist that I'm aware of is Clayman.
Clayman's very
because Tom King wanted to use him for the whole Batman run.
Yeah.
And instead only got him for like
Batman
10, 12. Yeah, but he did get them. He got a few issues in his main run by Clayman, but then he got Batman Catwoman just with Clayman, and it delayed the start of it for a long time.
A while.
Like 6 to 9 months, I was thinking. Because it said it was going to be out in January.
Well, no,
right after he ended.
It said it was going to be out. It was never actually solicited. It was just it was like it's coming. It's going to come out, but it never actually appeared. But some guys are slow, and Clayman did most. They took a break, and then he wasn't able to draw some, and so I think Liam Sharp drew a couple issues. But Clayman is back on the back half of it. Some guys are slow. I mean, Gary Frank is a phenomenal artist. He just did Doomsday Clock. He had done the Batman Year One books, both with Jeff Johns. Great artist. Slow. Incredibly slow.
Earth One?
Oh, it's Earth One. Thank you.
Yes,
Yes, the Earth One books. Thank
It's
you.
like year one.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
No, you're good.
I mean, Jim Lee now is, obviously he has a lot of other duties, but like when he does draw, incredibly slow. And even back in the day, when he was doing Hush at Batman, I believe someone at DC bet him $100 that he wouldn't stay on schedule. And Jim actually managed to stay on schedule for that book. So he won the $100, but that's the kind of thing, like everyone knows he's slow. So some artists are just like that. It's just how the medium works. And, but Sid, I wonder if there's someone out there who has experience with watercolors and this kind of art style that just maybe lends itself. And so maybe it's a snake eating its own tail thing, that because you use watercolors, you have to be fast. Ergo, you are fast, as opposed to just being a fast artist in general. I see that trend with some of the artists that work in the medium with watercolors, that they seem to be the guys that don't miss, the guys that constantly work, the guys that hit deadlines and are able to put stuff out on
the prolific ones.
Yeah. It's just it's rare. So I think it's rare because a lot of guys aren't actually painting their pages, but when they do, you get some beautiful artwork, and apparently you get it on time, maybe more so than some other guys. At least that's the way it seems to me.
Yeah. Well, and Tyler seems like a great collaborator.
Yeah.
All right. So we need to wrap up. One thing I want to mention before we wrap is the songs on the back of each cover.
Yes.
I'm not going to read all the lyrics to you. If you're reading in trade, I don't know that you get them.
I don't think you have them there. But
you've got quotes from Tangerine by Led Zeppelin, Get Off My Cloud by Rolling Stones, Downbound Train by Bruce Springsteen. Let's see. Locked Up in the Trunk of a Car by the Tragically Hip. Falling Off the Edge of the World by Black Sabbath. And How's It Gonna End by Tom Waits. Now, on our show notes, we will put together a Spotify playlist if you want to just feel the vibe of the book. I did listen to the first 6 of this playlist today, and it's kind of that redneck rock. Aside from Tom Waits is Tom Waits no matter what context.
Yeah,
but
well, Black Sabbath isn't
it's
really
the blue collar stuff.
But also, the specific lyrics that they chose that are handwritten back on the back covers. We'll have pictures of those as well, so you can kind of see not just the vibe of the song, but the specific lyrics they chose, and kind of see how they call and tie into the issues, the subject matter of those issues. So you can see.
But I love a comic
songs.
with the soundtrack.
You do.
Royal City, man, he had a mixtape in the back of every single one. Mm-hmm. You can just go on Spotify and search Jeff Lemire Royal City and see the mixtapes for all 14 issues. And it's like 90s grunge rock.
Well, yeah,
like,
that's
man,
what it's
my
set.
stuff.
So yeah, I think what they're trying to do there is maybe set a mood with each one of the songs and tie it to not just the lyrics they put on the back being relevant to the comic, but also the vibe and feel of the songs they chose to go with the issues. So so we'll have those up for people who are interested, who want to delve a little deeper. And again, if you're reading in trade, I don't think you get those back covers. So we'll be sure to provide those for you so you can enjoy that as well and get the full experience.
Yeah. All right. Do you want to recap with one favorite moment before we sign off?
Sure. Yeah. We touched on a little bit there, but it is back when in issue 3 after Maria shoots Big Dan. It is kind of a dark moment, but that page I think is just really incredible because it starts out, the top half is Maria shooting Dan, and it's you see the two of them. Maria's behind him. It's fairly graphic. The bullet going through the back of Dan's head and coming out the front. You can clearly see that he's going to die from this. And there's a big sound effect in the back there by the gun, bang, and that's the top half of the page. And then the bottom half of the page is this incredibly beautiful wide shot of Robert's house. There's this incredible sky. It's purples, blues, and reds. Just an absolutely gorgeous view of this house on the lake. And then right down by the porch, where you can't see any people, but that's where we know our characters are, very small, you see 4 more sound effects that say bang, 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 bang. And it's real small, and it's just to get across that there was one shot to the back, through the back of the head, and then presumably after he's fallen,
no regrets.
She puts 4 more into him, but it's done in a way that you're removed from it, and you as the reader, you know what's happened. And again, it makes you think about who this character is, that not only did she not hesitate one bit, not just to shoot Dan, but to shoot to kill. And then after he's dead, to put 4 more bullets into him. Who is that character? What is her motivation? What is she seen and experienced? And I love the way that is done with this, just again, this incredibly beautiful kind of vista, this half scene of this house, beautiful house in the lake, and just the small sound effect of these former bullets, and that you, the reader, you know exactly what's happening, set against this incredibly terrible, dark moment, but it's set against this just incredibly beautiful looking view of this house.
And I think that really sums up the whole first trade, right? It's
I think
like,
so, yeah.
It's dark and it's gritty, but it's visually stunning.
There's a beauty
beautiful.
to where they are and what they've and kind of in what they set up and said they're on this nice part by this nice lake here. It looks really great and peaceful, but yeah, there's still a darkness and a messiness to it, and you see that in this one page right there, the close up of the violence, and then kind of this pulled back view of what seems, idyllic. Excuse me. What seems idyllic, but kind of has this dark undertone that's still there.
Right. Yeah. No, that's great. I actually just noticed those 4 extra bangs as we were discussing it, not when I was reading it.
Oh, yeah.
So it sounds like I got full marks for mentioning it earlier, but
I think so, definitely.
I was just scrolling. My favorite is just at the beginning of issue 4. I wrote the quote down, and I had to go find it again. And it says, our security thing that keeps us safe around here, each other. First of all, that's laying pipe for the thing that keeps us safe is each other. We look out for each other. That notion is what the thread that the Jenga piece gets pulled from that at the end of this story arc.
Yes, yeah.
Now that there's suspicion and doubt about a murder among them,
we see it. But we see it in action first.
We see it in action first,
and then at the very end when with Humbert's taunt / real knife pull. But yeah, the idea of that's when it starts to fall apart. But we see it before we see it deteriorate. We see it in action.
But the next line is actually my my like bookmark saver for quote here. Everybody knows everybody. We're preserving the art of treating each other like human beings. Bam. It's like, okay, I don't really respect what you guys are doing. I'm not going to sign up for it. But that mission statement is something I can get behind.
If we could all strive for that,
preserving the art of treating each other like human beings.
Absolutely.
Like I think each time we do these episodes, we'll be if we play according to our own rules, we'll be dropping some of these like great insights and quotes on Twitter with very little context.
Yeah.
So like Matt Kindt, Tyler Jenkins, Grass Kings episode issue 4. It doesn't hopefully just enough to like pique people's interest. And if this is a book that's new to you, I would encourage you to press on, and I'll give you a fair warning that the second trade it's good and it's necessary, but it doesn't do a ton for me.
Okay. Yeah, I can see that.
I think the series ends well and resolves well. But if you got through 1 and you're like, I like it, just know there's like a little tone shift. There's a genre shift even.
There's a genre shift. I think we can safely say, kind of reiterating what we talked about in the Zero episode, the idea that each 3 of these arcs, it's the same setting, it's the same characters, but there is a slight genre shift, but I think it's most abrupt between 1 and 2.
It's jarring.
Yeah. By the time you go from 2 to 3, it's a little more natural, but I think it is pretty jarring between 1 and 2, and I think that can throw some people. But I think,
and it doesn't mean it's bad.
No,
right?
no.
It just means it's different.
Yeah.
And I was all in on what they were doing, and then they kind of pull a rug out from under me and are doing this other thing. But it's like, if you think of it in terms of like, this is season 1 of a show, this is season 2 of a show. Sometimes shows take different shifts with different seasons,
and I think it reads
or a movie trilogy.
In here, it reads better in terms of a collected story arc, because when you're reading it, when I was reading it in single issue, you get to issue 7, and you're like, okay, well, this doesn't feel like what we were doing in the first 6 issues. And
I'm not sure I noticed that end of part 1 caption when I was reading single issue the first time.
It takes a while to build into it, and you kind of see what they're building and what they're talking about, some kind of the themes they're hitting on. I think it's easier to read in a collected format, knowing that, okay, this story is going to start off a little different, but it's contained here. So I'm going to read it, and I think you're a little more accepting of it. So I think it's a little
once
easier
we
to
get
swallow.
into it, I like it.
Yeah.
It was just, I had the experience all over again, rereading it for this, that like, man, this is just a different story.
It is. But we'll get there next week.
Yes, next week. We are so far over on our usual time, but I'm hoping that you've discovered a new book. If you have discovered that you aren't a fan of this book, but you like the art here, Tyler Jenkins has a lot of great stuff. If you love the storytelling and maybe don't like the art, which is inconceivable to me, Matt Kindt has lots of great stuff that we covered in the 0 issue for both of them. So that's all I have to say for this episode, and we're going to wrap under 2 hours.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
So, all right, until next time, talk to you later.
Peace.